Thank you for joining us today. Gosh, I've loved everything that's been spoken of so far, and forgive me, I don't know your names too well. Luna, Katrina, Miguel.
Miguel.
Okay, art, excellent. Luna, I've loved the thing that you spoke about, groveling towards the ideas that were extinguished, through the Inquisition. Those old ideas. I'm a believer in the way. I love God. I read the Bible. I'm also a mystic, and I love using plants. In Genesis, it speaks about like eating and using every thing that bears fruit, and every herb that grows on the earth, and I fully try and practice that. So I love these old ideas, and I love how you're bringing those things back. I heard a number of different things I wanted to ask about. I wanted to ask about the beer pre-hops. I wanted to ask about datura. I hope these questions aren't too shallow, but I definitely am looking forward to engaging myself into new plants. And like if you eat the leaves or the flowers, or because I've seen it everywhere all of my life, and everyone was like, "Don't touch it; it'll make you go crazy." And I don't know. Nobody speaks about these things. Nobody's ever told me how to use Amanita muscaria, so I've never used it. I would also love to hear more about what was the Miguel, the plant that you spoke about that was the sweet aroma.
Jurema.
The Jurema.
Jurema. Okay. Okay. Was there another name for it? No.
Provenzana.
Well, let's get the questions once, and then we'll try and answer them. So we have one on beer, one on Jimson weed, and one on this other plant. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Excellent.
Great.
Actually, I'm definitely not an expert on the pre-hops psychoactive beers. What I know from talking to Christian, and he has actually a book out. What's the name of the book? Do you know?
He's got several.
Yeah, he has several, and we can refer you to his work for more in-depth. It's been his life's work studying these things. I got personally downloaded with a recipe for me. And I'm not sharing it yet because I haven't personally made it or tried it on myself, which is a real key thing, I think, for curanderos. So, next question?
No less. Let me take a little bit of a stab, because we did have Christian Reich come here and speak, and those of you, how many here in the audience remember that? There's a few of you here. He spoke quite eloquently and quite at length about the whole purity law that you heard about in the 1600s. Which was an attempt by the church to re-establish control over a psychedelic experience that was ongoing. So there's a lot of literature out there. Jamie Cobb gave a little bit of a talk about beer this year, and I asked him to kind of continue that next year. One of the things I think that was very interesting was that, and I've had Amanita muscaria beer, I've had beers, in fact, there's all kinds of additives that you can use in beer in place of hops. One of the reasons they gave hops was, as Luna was alluding to, you have this rush of energy with most beers. You get this high energy, and then you crash because you're put to sleep, and that was an intentional use of hops to put you to sleep so that you didn't do any damage. And you couldn't go too far. But before that, the use of all kinds of hallucinogens as additives took you to different places. And the beers were used all over the world. Whatever grains were used, beers were used. And beers, whether you spit to do the yeast, as Jamie was telling us, you spit into a bowl, and you masticated the juices, and that's how we started to use the yeast from your mouth yeasts to more sophisticated systems. But lots of people, oftentimes people, I think one of the striking things I remember about beers was that beers were used oftentimes with sacrificial victims in ritual rites, so that they didn't experience any pain. They experienced an incredible high from being the victim because they were inebriated in this way. So there are lots of uses that have been lost and lots of knowledge that have been lost about beer. And the last transition I'll make to the question about Jimson weed is that I come from California. My family goes back 7 generations in California, and among the traditional people in California, Tolowake, Jimson weed, was the divination plant ally of choice for most of the tribal groups. Now, using Jimson weed is something deters, the entire Datura family. As a hippie, I once had an LA fellow tell me, "Oh yeah, man, I got some of this belladonna, you gotta try it." And so I did. I took this belladonna tea, and I couldn't see for 3 days. I had to hold everything, and my eyes dilated, and I tried to eat a peanut butter sandwich and almost choked to death, literally, because the constriction of the blood vessels. So these are not things to play with. These are not things to go experimenting with. I think if you want to experiment, you want to use the kind of model that Katrina talks about of small doses. McIlvaine has said that he never had any poisonous mushrooms, but he took tiny doses of things and used his intuition to understand them. So Tolowake, I have heard, if you put some of the seeds in a unfermented beer and let them sit for a couple weeks, that's one way to experience a modulated amount. But again, I wouldn't recommend you try anything unless you really spend some time studying about this, particularly Jimson weed.
In Peruvian tradition, Brugmansia, which is a beautiful tree, it looks like a Jimson weed, but a tree, is such a powerful being that when you're walking down a trail and the trail suddenly takes a big curve around a plant, it's because people believe they shouldn't even walk near the plant. That's how energetically intense it is. And that's as much essence as you should have of that plant is about 20 feet away from it. So I wouldn't suggest anyone actually ingest these. Shamans in the Amazon use up to 100 different admixture plants in addition to the primary constituents of ayahuasca, which is ayahuasca and chacruna. And oftentimes they'll make tourist ayahuasca with Brugmansia in it because they know they're never going to see these people again and they want to blow them away and give them a really good experience, so they'll go back to the States, not good experience, but an intense experience. They'll go back to the States and tell people how intense it was, and then other curious people will come and pay a lot of money to drink it. And some very responsible shamans use it. A shaman in particular that I love, he's almost 90 now and a very accomplished herbalist. And I made a brew with him once for 60 people, an ayahuasca brew in the Amazon, and he put one little leaf of what they call toe, they call the Brugmansia toe there, in that just for a little while. When we boiled the ayahuasca for maybe 36 hours, he put it in for an hour, pulled it out, and you could feel it. So it's not something that I would ever brew up myself or utilize myself, but it's a beautiful plant to just take in the essence of. Like you said, I've sat under them and just with the flower, the energy of the flower raining down on me, it brings very intense ancestral dreams, and it gets you in touch with the ancestral spirits of that land. They're very much there in your presence. That's how you utilize that.
And I guess I can't speak in so much detail, partly because it's my friend who's told me and that's too far away. But one thing I can share from what he shared was that it was very dark. That was the adjective. It might be dark in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you guys kind of got what I know. Luna knows my story of coming back from Peru with some ayahuasca. And I thought I was all big time, and then I heard the story about that same batch having been used. This is in Iquitos, and even the shaman was this very experienced soul character, all over the place, because he had young people making it, and he had done too much toe into it, but it definitely had visionary qualities that just regular straight ayahuasca, doesn't have. That's what they say, it adds color, it paints it better. So, yeah. What was the next question?
Yeah, there was
The plant that you... Oh, sorry.
At the mic.
Oh, yes, please. The plant that you had spoken about that had the wonderful smell that you said emitted even from the plants when you were gardening. The name of it and...
Well, we call it Jurema, and you call it